Right now, tens of thousands of pieces of us are sitting out in space. Most will be gone before your grandchildren are born. A few will still be out there when the sun swells up and boils the oceans off this planet. And one of them, is a man. Not a statue, not a photograph, an actual person, buried in a crater near the south pole of the moon, with a line of Shakespeare wrapped around him in brass foil. We're going through every mark humanity has left beyond this world, ordered by how long it survives. We start with the largest thing we've ever built, which is also the first to die. And we end on the one object that will outlast the Earth itself. Number 1, the International Space Station. We start with the tamest one on the list, and it's the one that stings. The space station is the biggest thing humans have ever assembled off this planet, roughly the length of a football field. 420 tons of aluminium and glass and cable, moving at 5 miles per second. And it is falling, right now, while you're watching this. Even 250 miles up, there's still a faint haze of atmosphere. Not enough to breathe, enough to drag. So a few times a year, engines fire and shove the whole station back up where it belongs. It's a boat with a slow leak, and somebody has been bailing it out without a single break for 25 years. Stop bailing, and the ocean wins in about a year. Around 2030, the last crew leaves, and a purpose-built vehicle with 46 thrusters docks on and pushes it down deliberately. Aimed at Point Nemo, the spot in the South Pacific farther from land than anywhere else on Earth. Solar arrays tear away first, then the modules, then the spine. And here's the detail that sticks. Point Nemo is so remote that the nearest human beings usually aren't on any shore. They're overhead in orbit. The station's grave was chosen because the only people close enough to watch it fall would be the ones living where it used to be. That's the biggest thing we ever made, and it lasts a few decades. Everything else down there goes the same way. 13,000 working satellites, tens of thousands of dead ones, Hubble included. Low orbit is self-cleaning. Give it a century or two, and the atmosphere quietly files the whole lot back down and burns it. But that's only true down low. Climb higher, and the drag that erases everything underneath simply stops working. Number 2, the graveyard belt. 22,000 miles up, a satellite orbits at exactly the speed the ground turns beneath it. It hangs over one spot forever. That's where television, weather, and communications satellites live, and it's the most valuable real estate off this planet. So when one of them dies, we don't leave it there. Operators burn their last drops of fuel, pushing the corpse a few hundred kilometers higher into a band with a name that tells you everything: the graveyard orbit. There are hundreds of them up there now. No power, no signal, still circling once a day in perfect formation with a planet they stopped speaking to decades ago. At that height, there's no air at all, so nothing wears them down. Their orbits should hold for millions of years. Picture that. Long after the last human city has weathered into a stain in the rock, Earth will still be wearing a faint ring of tombstones, each one keeping pace with a patch of ground that no longer remembers what it was. At least those are still tied to Earth. The next one isn't tied to anything. Number 3, Starman. In February 2018, a rocket company needed to test its biggest rocket. Instead of bolting a block of concrete to the top, they bolted on the founder's cherry red sports car with a mannequin in a spacesuit at the wheel. It looked like a joke. It's now one of the longest-lived objects our species has ever made. The car isn't orbiting Earth. It's orbiting the sun on a long loop that swings out past Mars and back. And here's the part most people get wrong. It is not out there gleaming. Unfiltered sunlight and cosmic radiation have almost certainly destroyed everything soft on it: the leather, the plastic, the rubber, the paint. What's left is a skeleton. But metal in a vacuum doesn't rust. Rust needs water and oxygen, and out there you have neither. A car rots in a desert because of rain and air. Take both away, and what you've built is closer to a fossil than a vehicle. That frame should keep looping around the sun for tens of millions of years. So a publicity stunt has a real chance of outliving the civilization that launched it, but nobody designed it to last. The next object was built for exactly that, and its makers knew precisely how long it would take. Number 4, LAGEOS, and the message nobody alive will read. In 1976, NASA launched something that looks less like a spacecraft than an object out of a myth: a solid metal sphere 60 centimeters across, a brass core wrapped in aluminium, studded with 426 glass prisms. It's called LAGEOS. Fire a laser at it from the ground and the light bounces straight back, so we can measure the distance to the millimeter and watch the continents crawl. Here's why it survives. No electronics, no fuel, no batteries, no moving parts. Nothing on it can break because there's nothing on it to break. It's a ball bearing with a purpose, sitting 6,000 kilometers up, above the reach of the air. Its predicted lifetime in orbit is 8.4 million years. The engineers understood what that number meant, so they sealed something inside it. 2 steel plaques designed by Carl Sagan in the same stretch of his life when he was building the Voyager record. The plaque is a map, 3 maps actually, Earth's continents as they were 268 million years ago, welded into one landmass, Earth as it is today, and Earth as it should look in 8.4 million years, the year the sphere is expected to fall home. On that last map, California has torn away from the mainland and drifted out into the Pacific. It isn't a message to aliens, it's a message to whoever is standing here when it lands. And Sagan very deliberately did not assume that would be us. That's what we left on purpose. But the marks that may last longest were left by accident, by men who were simply walking. Number 5. The Footprints. 12 people have walked on the moon. The last one climbed back into the lander in December 1972. Their footprints are still there, unchanged, sharp-edged, exactly as pressed. On Earth, a footprint in sand survives one tide. On the moon, there is no tide. No wind, no rain, no air moving at all. And a lunar dust isn't rounded and soft like beach sand. It's shattered rock, jagged, never smoothed by water, so it locks together and holds a shape like cement that never dries. They'll erode eventually, but only by being sandblasted 1 grain at a time by micrometeorites arriving at tens of thousands of miles an hour. That takes millions of years. Boot prints from 1969 will still be readable when our species is a geological question mark. The flags did not do as well. Ordinary nylon bought off the shelf, and 50 years of unfiltered ultraviolet has almost certainly bleached them completely white. The flags we planted to prove we were there are now blank sheets, and the footprints we never meant to leave are the part that stayed. On that same gray plane, one crew left something deliberately and told almost nobody. Number 6. The Fallen Astronaut. In August 1971, before leaving the moon, Apollo 15's commander walked a short distance from the rover, crouched down, and placed a small aluminium figure in the dust, 3.5 inches tall, a stylized human body in a spacesuit, lying face down. Beside it, he laid a plaque listing 14 names, every astronaut and cosmonaut then known to have died in the pursuit of spaceflight, Americans and Soviets, together, on one list, in the middle of the Cold War. Some of those Soviet names had only recently become public at all. The USSR did not advertise its dead. He didn't announce it during the mission. He mentioned it quietly at a press conference afterwards. It's still lying there. No museum, no roof, no visitors. The first and only piece of memorial art on another world. And the ground holding it will keep holding it for millions of years. Almost certainly longer than the 2 countries that carved those 14 names. A short distance away sits a piece of Apollo hardware that isn't a relic at all, because we're still using it tonight. Number 7. The mirrors that still work. Apollo 11, 14, and 15. Each left a panel of small reflectors on the lunar surface. Corner-cut glass, with one very useful property. Whatever angle light strikes them from, they throw it straight back where it came from. More than 50 years later, observatories on Earth still fire lasers at those panels. The beam spreads on the way, so a tight pulse leaving Earth arrives at the moon as a patch a couple of miles wide, and out of an astronomical number of photons sent, a handful come back. That's enough. Time the round trip and you know the distance to the moon to within a few centimeters. Every other Apollo experiment eventually shut down. Every single one, except these. They need no power, so they cannot fail. They're the last piece of the Apollo program still returning data. Half a century after the men who set them down came home and grew old. And here's what they keep telling us. The moon is leaving, about 3.8 centimeters a year, roughly the speed your fingernails grow. That's what we left on purpose. What we left by accident is harder to explain, because some of it may still be alive. Number 8. The Lunar Library. On the 11th of April, 2019, an Israeli lander called Bereshit lost its main engine in the final seconds of descent and hit the Sea of Serenity at full speed. Bolted to it was a disk the size of a DVD, 25 stacked layers of thin nickel holding roughly 30 million pages, the whole of English Wikipedia, a key to 5,000 languages, and samples of human DNA. A backup of our civilization in a package smaller than your hand. Nickel doesn't melt easily. The team behind it believes the disk survived, thrown clear across the impact site, and that it's lying intact on the moon right now. That's the part everybody reports. Here's the part that made scientists uneasy. Sprinkled onto the tape holding that disk in place were thousands of tardigrades, microscopic animals under a millimeter long that survive by drying themselves into a dormant husk. In that state, they've survived boiling, freezing to near absolute zero, crushing pressure, and direct exposure to the vacuum of space. They can't grow up there. There's no water and nothing on the moon can wake them. But dry, shielded, locked at lunar temperature, that dormant state has no obvious expiry date. So the honest position is this. We did not plant life on the moon, but we may well have left some there, paused mid-sentence, waiting for a drop of water that will almost certainly never arrive. A backup of humanity, guarded by sleeping animals. And it still isn't the strangest thing up there, because near the moon's south pole, there is a grave. Number 9. The Man on the Moon. His name was Eugene Shoemaker, and almost everything you associate with the moon passed through him first. He was a geologist who did something nobody had done before. He treated other worlds as places, with rock and history and a story you could read, instead of lights in the sky. He proved the moon's craters were impact scars, not volcanoes. He trained the Apollo astronauts to read lunar geology, so they'd know what was worth picking up. With his wife Carolyn, he discovered hundreds of asteroids and around 20 comets, including the one that broke into fragments and slammed into Jupiter in 1994, while the entire world watched. He wanted to go himself. He applied. He was rejected on medical grounds, and he called it the great disappointment of his life to have taught the men who walked up there and never once stand on the ground he'd spent his career explaining. In 1997, he was killed in a car crash in the Australian outback, out hunting for impact craters. Days later, a colleague, the planetary scientist Carolyn Porco, read about his death in the morning paper and had an idea. Within weeks, 1 ounce of his ashes had been sealed into a small capsule, wrapped in brass foil, and fixed to a NASA probe called Lunar Prospector. On the foil, they etched an image of Meteor Crater, where he'd done his defining work, an image of the comet that carried his name, and a passage from Romeo and Juliet, chosen by Porco. Take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with the night. The probe mapped the moon for 18 months. Then, on the 31st of July, 1999, NASA deliberately flew it into a crater near the lunar south pole at around 3,800 miles an hour. He's still down there, 1 ounce of a person in a place with no weather, no water, and no decay. Eugene Shoemaker is the only human being buried on another world, and barring something extraordinary, he'll still be there, unchanged, long after every one of us is gone, which leaves exactly one object, the only thing on this list that isn't coming home, isn't wearing down, and isn't orbiting anything at all. And last, the golden record. Right now, about 26 billion kilometers away, a machine built in the 1970s is still moving. Voyager 1 launched in 1977 on a 4-year job. It's still going. This November it crosses a line no object made by human hands has ever crossed. 1 full light day from Earth. Say good morning to it on a Monday, and you hear back on Wednesday. Its plutonium generators lose about 4 watts every year, and NASA has been switching off instruments one at a time to keep the rest breathing. Sometime in the 2030s, the last one goes dark, and the longest conversation our species has ever held ends quietly, with nobody able to reach out and fix a thing. But the spacecraft doesn't stop. It's moving at 17 kilometers a second in a direction with nothing to curve it. and bolted to its side is a gold-plated copper disc. On it, greetings in 55 languages, 90 minutes of music from across the planet, 115 images, the sound of rain, of surf, of a human heartbeat, and the recorded brainwaves of a woman who had fallen in love a few days before they put her in the machine. On the cover, a map giving our position measured against 14 pulsars and a uranium clock, so whoever finds it can work out how long ago it was made. There's almost nothing out there to wear it down. No air, no water, no weather, barely any dust. Estimates for how long that disk stays readable run to around 1 billion years. Sit with that number. In 1 billion years, the sun will have brightened enough that Earth's oceans are expected to be boiling away. No cities, no coastline, no footprints, no ring of tombstones, no metal sphere coming home with a map of California folded inside it. Every single thing in this video will have been erased, swallowed, or burned. And a copper disc with a woman's heartbeat pressed into it will still be moving through the dark between the stars, traveling exactly as fast as it is tonight, carrying the sound of a species that no longer exists, with nobody, anywhere, under any obligation to ever find it. We ranked this whole list by how long things survive, and the answer turned out to be simple. Almost everything we built to be permanent comes home. The only thing that truly lasts is the thing we sent away. If you made it this far, comment golden record so I know which of you stayed to the end. And if the man buried near the South Pole ends up sitting in your head tonight, good. He'd have liked that.